Here.
All right. Welcome to the series of video chats with young people and experts. Yeah, if you guys, Kristen, if you guys could mute yourself for now, perfect. And then we'll have you unmute when we're ready to talk again. I'm going to do a really, really short introduction because there's going to be a lot of information online for folks who tune in after the fact. But we're thrilled to have this conversation on empathy. These chats are designed to accompany the SEL Practices Guidebook and Toolkits and the webinar series that's ongoing. These are really intended to be informal conversations to dig more deeply into each domain of social and emotional learning, and hear from young people and staff in the after-school programs what it really looks like to live those experiences and to what those domains really look like when they're in action in the programs. So they're informal, they're conversational. We encourage you guys to talk to each other, ask each other questions, stop and dig in and interrogate things that interest you. We'll tee it up with a few questions and then really encourage you guys to just keep pushing it and sharing your thoughts and reflections, because we really want to hear from you. During this session, we'll take questions on Twitter with the hashtag SEL Challenge, Social and Emotional Learning Challenge. So you can tweet questions to SEL Challenge, and if we've got time, we'll ask them of the folks. Finally, this is going to be recorded. We'll play it on selpractices.org and on Spark Action. And I'm going to turn it over to Kylie now to introduce our panel today, and we're going to have 45 minutes or so to have a great conversation about empathy. Thanks, great. Everyone. And again, a quick reminder, please mute yourself when you're not speaking.
Thanks, Caitlin. And Caitlin, if you could just double check the YouTube when you get a chance. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to introduce our fantastic speakers today. But first, I just want to say that our video chat today comes from a probably close to 2-year research study where we dove in deep with 8 OST exemplary providers, 2 of which we have on the line today, focused on best practices to promote social emotional learning. And we produced the Preparing Youth to Thrive field guide, which we'll be touching on a little bit today, but mostly want to just have that conversation about what empathy looks like and feels like for folks. But you can learn more through the field guide about the research that we did and where these conversations are coming from. So I would first like to introduce Adrian and Romanita from the Wyman Center, which is based in St. Louis, and they're part of the Teen Outreach Program, which is a nationally replicated program that focuses on service learning and peer support and up to 20 hours of community service throughout the year. And so we're going to be hearing from them in just a little bit. And I would also like to introduce Emily and Kavita of YW Boston and the INIT program, the Youth Initiative program. And their focus is on building social justice programs, the opportunity to think about racial, gender, and sexual diversity. And so we're really excited to hear the work that they do and the work that as they promote empathy in their programs. And so first I want to check in with Romy and Romanita in St. Louis and hear from you on how you got involved in the Teen Outreach Program. How did you get started? And Romanita, you might need to unmute.
My name is Romanita, and how I got involved with TOP is my family, like each generation has went through TOP. I took it off.
Okay, go ahead.
Each, like, all my brothers and sisters, cousins, aunties, and uncles all joined TOP. So when I joined when I got to 6th grade, I joined TOP. So it's like been a family thing passed down that each family member goes to TOP once you reach the 6th grade.
That's cool. That's cool. That's great. Sounds like it's all in the family for you guys.
Yes.
And Kavita, how about you? Tell us a little bit about your involvement in the INIT program.
Well, last year I started getting more involved with social justice and diversity work at my school, and my mentor there, Jahar, she suggested that I start to do some work outside of school and meet other people my age in the area to see what kind of work that they were doing. So that's how I got involved within it.
Awesome, great, thanks. And I'm going to ask Caitlin to kind of jump in here and share a few questions that we've got for our team.
Yeah, so I love hearing about how you guys got involved, and I'm just curious in general, we talk about empathy a lot. We talk about it as a term, and the ability to understand different perspectives and where people are coming from. But what does it mean to you personally? What do you think empathy means? And can you share a time or a story where you really saw things from a different perspective, or empathy became something you were actually aware of experiencing? And let's start, Kavita, with you.
Okay. So I guess the first time, especially within it, that I started to understand what empathy meant and how it sort of differed from sympathy was during our immersion week. We had a workshop on race and diversity with race, and we did this activity where we split up into different groups based on racial identity and wrote down sort of anonymous assumptions that we had about the other groups, and then each group would read the assumptions that were written based on them and then talk about how they felt about those assumptions. And that was sort of the first time that I think we all had a very painful and emotional night, but we all went through it together. And afterwards, you know, we could have been really angry at each other for what was written, or we could have sort of retreated and stayed within ourselves, but we took that stuff together and we had conversations afterwards, and we really understood that even though we didn't have the same experiences and we weren't in the same situations, we all were feeling very strongly, and we all felt sort of pain and things like that, and that we just had a very strong connection. So even though we weren't necessarily sure exactly what we were feeling, we all knew we were feeling something, and that really helped us sort of start to move forward.
Wow, that's really powerful. That's great. And Romanita, what about you? Don't forget to unmute.
Well, empathy means to me is like feeling what the next person went through. So like both of y'all know what y'all went through, and y'all understand each other's feelings rather than just saying I don't know what you're feeling. But I'm a CNA and I work at a nursing home, and it's this one patient that's in there because of she hurt herself. So basically she broke one of her legs, and I understand how she feels because my father was in the same predicament to where he broke his legs. But like I didn't know how to deal with it at first, but then like me being in TOPS and doing community service, I learned to like step up to the plate and take charge rather than be sad. So I understand how the lady felt and like the pain that she was going through and not being able to do things on her own. So I kind of told her like I understand what you're going through because my father went through the same thing and I was there to help him also.
That's really powerful. And how did that change how you interacted with her? How did knowing what she might be feeling change how you talked to her or how you interacted?
Like I was patient with her, and like I was there to help her take her time rather than with the other people trying to rush her. I was like going slow to her, letting her do things on her being stubborn, walking in. Is She's going to get back to her old self. So like I was just being patient with her.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Yeah, that's great. I love the idea of the difference between sympathy and empathy. And you both got to that by saying it's about understanding how people are feeling, not just getting, oh, you're sad, so therefore, it's taking, it sounds like you're both saying it's taking that next step to go from, you're telling me that you're sad or that something's going on in your life to really pausing and reflecting and trying to figure out what it might be like for that person. Do you think, I'm curious to know if in either of your programs you guys talked about this. Did you have moments where you would talk about empathy as empathy as you were doing it? I mean, did Adrian and Emily and the other folks you worked with, each of you in your respective programs, stop and sort of point out when there were moments of empathy, or were they just built in? And do you now sort of recognize them in your life? And Romanita, let's start with you since you're on camera right now. Can folks hear me? Oh, there you go. Can folks hear me okay?
Empathy was for, for me, empathy was kind of brought into in group situations have happened where empathy, where we have been the top members.
And Kavita and Emily, what about you?
I think that we never explicitly say like what you're experiencing right now is empathy. I think that it's more sort of like built into like the activities that we try to do to sort of give people the opportunity to share their perspectives and to hear the perspectives of others. So we frame it in a way that it's a learning opportunity for everyone to sort of see the world from a different point of view. But I don't think we've ever explicitly been like, you are learning about empathy right now, and like this is why it's important. It's much more sort of like subtly built into our programming, I feel.
Cool, that makes sense. That makes sense. We're checking in on Romy and Adrian, but you know, from Emily, from your perspective, how would you say that you work to create a program that builds empathy?
Hi, yeah, okay, it works. I was like, did I unmute it? Yeah, definitely. I think that to sort of build and like structure in empathy, we try to be really intentional about first creating like a really like safe and caring space for both the delegates who are our young people and our volunteers who work with them and help run our workshops. And sort of we try to establish that space by setting up things like community norms that sort of help us establish sort of a baseline of how we communicate with each other in this space, because especially at our immersion week, our summer program, where we have like really depthful workshops about like race and gender and sexuality and disability status, identity can be really emotional. So we try to set sort of like guidelines about like the best way to try to navigate this like really potentially emotional and like vulnerable space with each other. And we talk about things like assuming good intentions and having a conversation about intent versus impact. And we also talk about how we're all always learning as sort of delegates and as like the volunteers who help like work with the program. Like none of us ever know everything, and I think that sort of trying to communicate that we are all always learning, we're all going to make mistakes, and that we assume good intentions, that we're all here to try to do good work and to learn and to sort of grow to have good impact. That is sort of, we try to be really intentional about structuring it that way to be like really productive and be really helpful. And then I think we try to be intentional about the activities that we choose to do, so that we, like Kavita mentioned, the activity where people sort of write down their first impressions that they think when they think of different racial groups, and then having that conversation. We try to be like very intentional about the things that we choose to do to try to offer that space to get people to share like their stories with their experiences with their identities, as well as hear the perspectives from other people and the identities that they have.
That's awesome. That's awesome. It sounds like one important thing that comes into promoting or giving space for empathy is intentionality. That you really are intentional about both creating the safe space, creating the opportunities to learn from each other, and creating the opportunity to make mistakes and giving everybody the kind of room to do that and to benefit of the doubt.
It's really great. Yeah, it sounds like you're also creating a space where people can pause and reflect and challenge their own assumptions. I love the idea of assuming good intention, especially within ourselves, but then also pausing and challenging ourselves on what it is that we're expecting. Kavita, I think that the exercise that you described is so powerful and so incredible, and I wish that we could do it like on a national level, and I wish people would be, could have a safe space to talk about that and sort of blow open some of the myths, especially right now in our politics. And I'm just wondering, you started to get into this, but after you guys did that, after you shared first impressions and sort of stereotypes, what did you walk away thinking, and what were some of the things that you found yourself reflecting on in the days after that?
I think directly after, I would say that night, I was thinking less about the specific things that were said about my racial group or other racial groups, but I was thinking about sort of how it felt to have other people in my group understand what I was feeling, and how. So yeah, I guess I was focusing less on like what was sad and what was hard about that night, and what it just felt good to be part of a community where like either people were experiencing the same things that I were, or they got to hear how I felt about those things. And then afterwards, I guess it got me thinking a lot about what allyship it is, and what it means of it is that everybody has to bring the same things to the table, and everybody has to put in a similar amount of effort, and a way to do that if you're, I guess, not the oppressed group in the situation is to be empathetic. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Caitlin, you're on mute.
That's really powerful. That's amazing. I want to turn back to, do we have Adrian and Romani back? Romy, are you back? Your video looks good. It looks like you guys might be back.
We're here.
There we go.
Can you share some of the activities that you guys have done and some of the ways you've intentionally structured the program to embed empathy as one of the many SEL skills?
As a norm, we start off with what we call the 411. So it's pretty much getting the teens are giving us information as to what's going on with them in school, at home. They know it's a safe place for them to be able to talk this, or there's not really much going on. A lot of times we address this with our community service learning, whether we're at the American Cancer Society, Precious's Garden. They do work with Wilkinson Early Childhood Center. What else, Romy? They've done
out at camp.
They've done things at camp. They've done a rummage sale. So a lot of it ties into our community service learning.
Mm-hmm. That's great. That's great. I love the idea of the starting with the 411. Do you start each time you guys come together with that? Is there like a check-in period? Oh, that's cool.
Usually I'll have like a check-in question, and then this is their time to share whatever they want to share. It may be newsworthy, maybe something happened at school, something happening at home, and that gives me a guide as to where I really need to start at. Is this something that's going to impact my lesson, or should I just throw this lesson away and deal with what's really going on?
So you have to be in the moment.
Right.
Adrian, what helps you be intentional with your programming?
I think the teens really help me be intentional. Like, they will let me know where I need to go. We've had a few deaths that we've had to deal with, and it's like, whatever you were planning, that's not what we're going to do. This is, we need to talk about this. We need to work out our feelings. And so they are a great help to me.
Yeah, kind of a source of empathy flows between you.
Right.
Thank you.
How many young people are there, Adrian, in the program?
We have 30.
Wow. And do most people, is it 30 at any given time? Is it usually pretty close to that?
Um, it could be at any given time.
Yeah. Romy, was there a time you talked about the woman that you work with and that you're helping in your caretaking role? Was there another time in the program where something surprised you and it kind of stretched you out of your own space and you had to think about someone else's perspective? Or maybe when you shared something that kind of had people have to do that with you and they showed empathy to you?
Um, like I was saying, like it's majority of us in the top program are family. So whether it's cousins, sisters, or brothers, we're like, but it was a time where it was a community learning project, and we were when it was a call that our cousin had got murdered. So like it took like a hurt on the program because the majority of us, like I said, was family. So like all of us knew how each other was feeling because like there was a family member that we lost to a tragedy. So like we was all sad and but with the facilitators, they was all there for us. Like they called us to check in on us, see if we need anything, and to make sure that we were okay. Like they didn't just call the day that it happened; they called, weeks after to make sure that we were really okay because this was like a tragedy in our family. Like our cousin was murdered, so it like really hurt the family to like the core. So we was all just like sad. So we have,
The
we're trying to
unusual
work.
thing about our group is that we not only have their teens, but we might have had them too. So, like Romanita was saying, we have some kids whose parents have been in the program a few years back, and now we have them.
Mm-hmm.
So we're really close to our parents. Like we know the family dynamic.
Right. And they trust you. You've built trust.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm very sorry to hear that, Romanita. And it sounds like they really did have a lot of empathy for you. And as you said, it's not just a one-time thing. It's about staying connected over time and continuing to think about where you're coming from and what is going on. I'm curious to know if Romanita and Kavita, if you have questions for each other, because your experiences are sort of different in the programs. I mean, the programs are kind of different, and I'd love to know if you have things you want to ask each other.
I don't have any questions.
That's
Not at the
okay.
moment.
Kavita, what about you?
Emily, you guys need to unmute. Okay.
Sorry, we got it.
I guess one of my questions is like based on the program that you're in, how are ways that you've seen empathy impact like your everyday life, and how have you seen it sort of come out of your program, like you said with the woman you work at the nursing home? Like has that happened in other places, like at school or like with your friends or things like that?
Oh, Adrian, we
You're
need.
muted.
Can you repeat the question that you were asking?
How have you sort of taken your like skills of understanding what empathy is and sort of applied it to maybe with your friends or at school or with your family or other things like that?
Like in your everyday life.
Yeah.
So like I was saying, like as me being a CNA, like you can't just say like walk off and be like I don't understand how you're feeling because they also have feelings. So we have to like try to understand what their feelings, and then like in a family, when it's a tragedy, we all feel the same way. So like learning from tops, I learned, like I said once before, I learned to step up to the plate and be the leader and to like set on a set like um set like a goal or just set like a starting point to start to heal or just to like, because I know like I said everyone feels the same way, and then like with my friends I don't tell them like I understand because not all the time I understand how a person feels. So I'm just kind of be that person that sit back and let you vent to me and tell me like what's going on so I can try to understand. But if I don't understand, there's no way that I can help you.
Do you feel comfortable with your friends sometimes saying, I don't really understand how you feel, but I'm really feeling a lot for you? Has that ever happened?
Yes.
Yeah. Which is kind of another way of empathizing, to know that I may not know what you're going through, but I can compare to something in my life that helps me understand that you're struggling, and here's how. I'm really curious, Romanita, about what you're saying about stepping up and becoming a leader. I love that. I'd love to hear a little more. Like, how do you see your role in your family and your community and in the things that you do, and how has it changed over the last year or so?
And I mean by like saying that stepping up to the plate and being leaders, like in my family, well, I'm not gonna say in my family, but like in my immediate family, which is my mother and my sisters and brothers, like I kind of set the example because like it's 8 of us my mother has 8 children, and I'm the first of all of them to actually go to college and attend college. So it's like by me doing it, I'm setting an example for my little sister and my little cousins that are her age, that anything you set your mind to, you can do it. So like by me just going out, taking a chance and trying college and that I like it, and they see that I like college, so now it's like they're waiting to get older and go to college and do everything that I've did, like join many programs, join the dance team, just do a lot of activities that leads up to them going to college. So I'm kind of like a role model also, because not every college is not for everyone, but I'm that one person that actually took a chance and I like college. So
That's fantastic.
Romanita has stepped up in a lot of ways. For CSL, Community Service Learning, she's taken the point on figuring out what we're going to do, what comes next. Now that we've done this, now what do we do? So she's taken a point on a lot of our community service learning.
That's great. And you guys have some similarities in that regard with the INIT program and with their community action projects. And Kavita, maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
So I can tell you a little bit about what my delegation's community action project was. So we felt that we go to a predominantly white private school around Boston, Massachusetts, and we felt that class was an issue that we didn't address that much, especially since a lot of our students are on financial aid and no one really talks about the varied economy, like the varied households we come from, especially about money. So that's the topic that we decided to talk about. So what we did was at an all-school assembly, we sort of presented some statistics about class in America, sort of how class works, what the income and wealth disparities are in America, and things like that. And then we sent a survey out to the whole school about the times that they felt like their class was sort of assumed in the classroom. So like if a teacher has ever asked them to provide their own materials for something, if a teacher has ever assumed that they have a computer at home to do homework on, other things like that. And then we presented those results at an assembly and then sort of offered a time to debrief about that. So I think that has definitely turned me into more of a leader at my school, just because I guess we were tackling a topic that hasn't really been talked about as much, and not only were we bringing up this topic, we were sort of showing, so I'm a senior, so I felt like we were showing students younger than us that it was possible to talk about these things, and that if they are feeling some of the things that we're talking about, that they can talk about it. Yeah.
Kind of an interesting aspect to empathy, right? That you have more room to, talk about things because you can have a chance to relate and understand, and similar even in, so that's a, a social justice issue. That's a challenge that you are experiencing and wanting to take action on. And in a similar way too, you can connect around, like hearing from Anita talk about, losing a family member and feeling connected to those around her in terms of grief and giving room for, be it something that's really, it's a challenge, whether it's a social justice challenge that you want to speak up about, or a grief and relating to others and wanting to feel connected. There's a lot of ways that empathy gives us that room to do that, and feel safe to do that.
I'm curious, Kavita, so first I just want to pause and say that Romanita and Adrian had to leave us as we head to the top of the hour. But we are still got a few more minutes left in the discussion, and I'd love to continue as we have these next few minutes, especially since we had to start late, unfortunately. But I'm curious, Kavita, just to pick up on what you were just saying. What was the effect in the days after the assembly? Did you feel like a lot of discussion got sparked, and there were a lot of people sharing their experiences that maybe hadn't before?
I do. I think a lot more people were sort of keeping an eye out for what other people asked them to do or asked them for. I think a lot of people, I don't necessarily know if they were talking to their friends about it, but I do know that a lot of people were coming up to us and saying that they felt like we sort of started a forum for a discussion. So by explaining the different situations in America, we made it so that other people didn't have to explain their situations. They could just sort of talk about how they were feeling about that. And I think through that, we definitely created a space. Yeah.
You created sort of like a platform for the conversation to keep going after the project was over.
Yeah. Sorry, my words got a little.
No, you're good.
No, that was great. That's great. And that sounds very.
I wanted to say hello to Allison Williams. She's Vice President of Programs at Wyman there in St. Louis, and so thank you for joining us, Allison. Like Caitlin said, we had to say goodbye to Romy and to Adrian, but are thankful that they were able to join us. And so just wanted to say hello to you since we see you there, and thank you for joining us.
And Allison, I think you're on mute.
So you go up to the top left.
Up to the very top of your screen, you'll see some controls at the top, and you can unmute.
Got it.
Thank you, Kristen.
So I am not as good of a pinch hitter as Romy and Adrian's voices, but we know the importance Romy just spoke to of heading to college, and it's her cousin's graduation, and she absolutely had to be there. So I just wanted folks to know why, since we started a little late, she had to head out. But happy to answer anything else.
Of course. Well, we're excited for her, so that's great.
That is great. Allison, not to put you on the spot, but I'd love just your couple of sentences about empathy, and actually personally in your life, if you have a story to share about empathy, or what you're thinking about empathy these days.
Sure. I will share, I think from the perspective of all that has occurred, especially in the St. Louis region over the past couple of years, with all of the challenges that we have in this community around equity that truly have always been there, but very clearly emerged after the death of Michael Brown and the community's reaction to really our systemic issues. As I really listened to young people, part of what I heard young people say time and again is, if we really listened to one another, we wouldn't have gotten to this space. So I really just want to applaud the work of our partners at YW Boston through the INIT program, which creates that. When I think about the work that we do in TOP, really helping young people step into someone else's shoes through community service learning and really get that and understand. I think there's real truth. If we really sat and listened and had that ability to really step into someone else's space and really understand what that means and operate from a different perspective, I think we'd be in a very different space holistically. So I appreciate the work of the SEL Challenge and Weichert and Susan Crown to really help elevate the importance of intentionally developing this skill among our young people.
Thanks, Allison.
Beautifully said. And it's not just our young people who could use a little bit of practice.
Absolutely, absolutely. Probably our adults more so needing that.
Yes, for sure. Well, we have just a couple minutes left, and I'd love to I would really love to give Emily and Kavita the last word. on this issue and maybe thinking just a little bit about what you got to earlier about setting goals and resolving conflict and kind of assuming the best. I just would love some last thoughts from each of you, because I think those are powerful.
Do you want to start?
Yeah, sorry, we're like, wait, okay, like wrapping up. I guess that sort of along with like assuming good intentions, a way that I've like talked about empathy before with some delegates or even like in my own personal life is sort of it's helpful for me to frame like empathy and identity and how like all of that is really connected. Is that everyone has like many different identities, like very few people have the exact same overlapping identities. And that overlap creates a lens through which you view the world. And it impacts how you walk through the world, how you interact with other people, and the lenses that other people have. But I feel like sort of framing it in that way can be really helpful for me to remember that I see and think about the world the way that I do because of who I am and like everything that is put together to make me a person. But then on the flip side of that, there are other people who also see and go through the world in the specific way that they do because of who they are and how their identities overlap. So we may see the exact same situation, but think and feel about it very differently based on like that lens and sort of how we've become who we are. So I think that in like with our program, like sort of with framing like with the lens, like real active listening is really important, and sort of with all the activities that we do to sort of really give people the space to talk about who they are and how they got to be where they are. Active listening is really important to remember that your lens that you see the world is completely valid, and how you see it and how your experiences have shaped how you see the world. But it can be helpful to remember that there are also other people who see it a different way, and that you have to sort of meet in the middle somewhere for us to sort of have lasting impact and make change.
I feel like you totally covered it. I mean, yeah, what Emily said about sort of everyone needing to understand different lenses and where everyone's coming from, and that's sort of how you can build an allied community. Yeah. Cool. I don't know if I can add that much to that.
Kavita, could you tell me a little bit about active listening? Like, how do you define active listening for you? And how is that different from just the sort of listening that too often we do in our lives?
I think active listening, like, when I think of active listening, I think of it like the active reading that my English teachers tell me to do with books, and it's kind of listening to what a person's saying and analyzing it on your own, and it's like really hearing what they're saying and understanding everything that's sort of gone into what they're saying. So what Emily said about like all of your experiences, your background, they all affect everything that you say. So I would say active listening is understanding how people's experiences are affecting what they say, and then in return, coming up with your own responses to that.
Mm-hmm. Nicely said. I mean, we've touched on so many things, and I think we could have another half an hour discussion about all the identities and how emotional identity can be, and how identity is so caught up in empathy. I think it's great, and it sounds like you guys are just doing really great work. Is there anything that happens in the program that you didn't get to share that you wanted to share, or anything we should have asked about that?
Nothing comes to mind. Like you said, like we could sort of sit and just talk about like empathy and social justice probably for the next like 5 years. It's like maybe something that is also important to remember, like with programming, working with young people, is sort of the importance of, I guess, like modeling as volunteers and as like YW staff who work with our young people in these spaces where we like intentionally create like safe spaces where people can be open and honest. We sort of try to have conversations as a team, like a volunteer team, about what like modeling that looks like, and sort of within creating appropriate boundaries, but also like sharing like this, we're asking young people to like talking about race is really challenging, and that can be really hard to do like with a group of like really close friends. People start our program, they're a room of like 30 strangers, and we're like, all right, y'all are going to talk about race, which can be like really scary even for an adult. So I think that we sort of try to be intentional about practicing like modeling and being open with that vulnerability, like in appropriate spaces, to make sure, because the program is supposed to be for the young people, like the focus is for them, but we're not going to ask them to do something that we wouldn't be willing to do ourselves, like in being vulnerable and sort of sharing like parts of what make us who we are as people who work in this space too.
Yeah, I'd say one thing that like we reference a lot is the importance of real talk and being completely honest about like what you're feeling about and how you feel about what other people are saying. And I think that all the staff kind of set up a space for the delegates to be real and be honest, but then if need be, they also are willing to be real themselves, and that's just really helpful for, I think, me and all the other delegates to sort of see that and see how they're willing to do that, so we know that it's okay for us too.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I think the modeling is so key. Well, thank you all again for being patient with the Google Hangouts issues and for powerful and really wonderful reflections. I really appreciate everything that you guys have shared. I'm going to turn it over to Kylie to wrap us up and send us off, but thank you all. This was great. And I would love it if we could actually maybe ask you to do a little bit of blogging, perhaps, Kavita, and push some of the ideas that we just talked about, and particularly empathy and social justice. But let's talk offline, because I think folks would love to see some more reflections from you guys. This was great. Thank you.
Sure thing, and thanks Caitlin for a great conversation, and I would like to thank our audience today for participating, and again, like Caitlin said, for patience with some of the difficulties and the challenges, and for your empathy in that regard. And we are asking folks if they have any activities or ideas that promote empathy in their program, in your out-of-school time program, send them on to selpractices.org, and I'll share a link with our follow-up email that will go out. And then, not lastly, but just most importantly, I want to thank our participants today, and I want to thank you guys in terms of all of the prep work that you've done to make it here today and then being with us today. And so, Emily and Kavita, it was great having you join us from Boston and from the INIT program. And to Allison and to Adrian and to Romanita, we are just delighted that you guys could join us and tell Romanita that best wishes for her cousin's graduation, and we were just thankful that you all were able to share your stories and to bring your authentic selves to today, because that's part of how we connect with each other and how we share our stories. So thank you to everyone, and have a great afternoon.
Thanks for having us. Bye.
Bye-bye.